Americans nonetheless feeling blue about the economy on this Friday. Consumer sentiment plunging to 67.4. That's down from 77.2 and well off consensus estimates of 76. The University of Michigan gauge also showed the one-year outlook for inflation increased to 3.5%. So with the task of brightening your economic Friday, we've got the CEO of Sound Planning Group, Dave Strzeski, joining us now. Dave, best of luck to you to try to give some people some good news there. Is there any?
Well, Dave, when consumer sentiment falls like this, this was off a cliff. This is a meaningful read. I think that the consumer has really been trying to suspend judgment for the last quarter, the last 3 months, especially because we've seen such, nice rises here first quarter in the stock market. But I think that there's no question right now. The consumer has spoken. Things are much worse than they were last month, at least by sentiment's sake, as expectations for inflation are higher, unemployment is higher, and we're looking at interest rate challenges right now that are, I think, really starting to show up as this lag effect with the higher rates is really just beginning to impact our economy right now.
Yeah, Dave, how do you think Jerome Powell and the Fed read that number?
It's interesting because Powell is obviously very intelligent. He's got more economists that are working for him there at the Fed. And so how do they look at these numbers? I honestly think that the Fed is trying to paint a narrative. And of course, that's a part of their job. They're kind of in a difficult position, though, right now, because on one hand, if they cut interest rates like everyone's expecting, well, what's happened the last 4 times that this was expected? The market rallies. That's very inflationary. But at the same time, if they don't reduce these interest rates, then we're at risk right now of entering into a major recession. In fact, we're probably going to have a lot worse of a recession if he doesn't cut rates within a timely manner. So it's kind of a, tough spot to be in. You do it right, you do it wrong. Well, they're both kind of the same outcome here. So I do not envy Jerome Powell in this position, but if they don't cut rates, ultimately, I think that we are heading for a major financial crisis here in banking, and it's just beginning to show up again.
Cut rates in June? Are we talking 2 this year? What's your outlook?
Well, if you look at the statistical numbers, it's going to be like 1 or nothing, or potentially even rise. I don't think that they're going to be able to keep rates this high, although I think that he really wants to because inflation's trended up and he's acknowledged that now. So I think 2, 3 rate cuts make sense. But let's just ask this question: would 50 basis points, 75 basis points coming off that number, is that really going to make that meaningful of a difference when mortgage rates are at 7.5% today? I don't see that really making a meaningful difference for our economy, that somehow, hey, we're just now back to the races and everything's good. Basically 80% of our economy right now is struggling from this higher inflation and higher rent prices and all these things. So they're in a recession, while the top 20% was still with assets are doing pretty well because markets are up, things are doing great, they still have jobs, et cetera. So this is not a great moment for America if you actually look into that data. So Jerome Powell, I think, is trying to keep a high level. But if you look deep into it, it's very clear where we are, and it's getting scary.
We did hear from Dallas Fed Chief Lori Logan today. He said, quote, "It's just too early to think about cutting rates." What do you make of that, tipping the hat that we won't see one in June?
Well, I think this ultimately comes back to the Fed trying to not, get the markets too hyped up about, cuts, and then we get back to a rally here again. We're near all-time highs, and so this is a time frame where the Fed is going to try to do some speak to try to temper the market from going too far ahead. And so, I think it's intelligent to understand, hey, if they don't cut rates like everyone expected, and of course we rallied 4 times on that misinformation, by the way, because we were supposed to be cutting in July last year. If we don't actually get these cuts, that's not priced into the market. And so there's a lot that the Fed is looking at. There's a lot that's kind of psychologically trying to get people to comply and to do different things. But I'm very concerned, and I think that these Fed chair people also recognize these challenges, but perhaps they're not telling us everything. Just like 2008, hey, everything's wonderful. And then, of course, it ultimately wasn't.
One thing Powell did tell us, and probably his most mildly amusing comment of the press conference, was he sees no stag and he sees no inflation. It sounds like you might disagree with that sentiment.
Okay, so stagflation is ultimately the worst outcome that we could be expecting. So this is an economy that is stagnant, it's recessing, it's slowing down, and PMI and ISM indicators, which are manufacturing indicators, when they go below 50, that tells us a recession's here. Guess what? They're both below 50 right now. Also in April last year, last month, the stag part of this was that 43% of small businesses could not afford their office space. 1,000 companies have already announced year to date that they're going to be shutting down locations. We've got more unemployment right now, 372,000. This is our highest amount of unemployment through an April timeframe, other than 2020, going all the way back to the great financial crisis of 2008. And so the stag part of this is absolutely there. The inflation part, well, guess what? Inflation's at 3.5 according to their metric. But that's looking in the rearview mirror, saying, hey, over the last year, I like to look at it through the forward mirror. You know, what's coming next? So we had a 0.3% inflation read for the month, 0.4, 0.4. You add those up, times them by 4, that gives us a yearly outcome. And this says that we are looking at an inflation of about 4.4 to 4.8% over the next 12 months. So that is absolutely trending in the wrong direction to where the Fed wants to go right now. And so I think it's really apparent that the world economy is slowing down right now. The U.S. economy is slowing down right now. And these things are all converging at the same time, which I ultimately believe is going to be the scariest part of this thing, is that all these things coming together at once.
We are, however, on pace for, as I mentioned, an 8th straight positive session for the Dow, already the longest streak since December. It's up almost 100 points. So headline on the Wall Street Journal today reads, the Dow is a terrible index. Is that confirmation of that?
Well, you know, so here's the thing. Indexes do exactly what an index is supposed to do. We have market cap weighted indexes, which most of these are, and then there's equal weighted indexes, which would basically say, hey, if I put $500 in the S&P 500, it's $1 into each company. Well, the cap weighted ones tend to do really well. It's just we have so much concentration in just a few stocks right now that's really led the market. If you look at the equal weight position of the S&P 500, it's negative. The economy is actually not doing as well. And so to your point, are these indexes kind of broken? Well, I think that they actually are not truly telling us, you know, what's going on in the world. In fact, I think that they're really only employing like less than 10% of all workers here in the United States. So it's small business actually, like with these, you know, 43% of them that couldn't pay their mortgages. I think those are numbers that are actually more indicative of the truth. So people can spin information whatever way they want. Statistics can lie or tell you whatever narrative that you kind of spin them to do. But if you begin to look into the actual data, actual people, actual debt, actual things that are going on here today, yeah, I think that index is really not a true barometer of where the economy is. But again, you know, the top 20% with money invested are still making money and still doing well.
A bit archaic. So give me then the one number you do look at that you think is an accurate gauge, and just one thing since it's Friday that you're looking out for next week.
Okay, so right now, when we begin to evaluate the economy, I mentioned it earlier, the ISM and PMI indicators, these talk about manufacturing. Why manufacturing? Because manufacturing is this really important idea, because we've got materials that have to get shipped and come in. Something has to be produced and manufactured. Then transportation needs to be, getting it out to all of our communities, et cetera. And everything comes on semi-trucks. And so manufacturing is one of these indexes that, again, it is ultimately shown us when we're going into recessions and when we're coming out of them. And so we have a reading right now of both of those going negative. And if you look at it on a worldwide scale, that is also true across, Germany and UK right now are in recessions. Japan is going into something that we have no idea what it's going to look like. China, and specifically their real estate, is the largest sector in the world, and it is an absolute crisis. Could any of those things be, the thing that really tips this thing into the next, level of recession and financial crisis? I'm ultimately looking at banks, and I'll just share this one thing with you that I think is important, and I want to see how this develops. Obviously, we're watching more banks right now being declared that they're having financial struggles. Why have we not been talking about this? Why have we not been talking about maybe Moody's coming in and downgrading us this year? It's because those are not popular topics to be discussing when you're trying to, sell stocks and promote all these wonderful things. I think people need to have a healthy perspective of both when bull markets occur, and then also when bear markets happen. And we have to be prepared for these times before they show up. So biggest concern right now is actually how the bond market is going to react, with potentially interest rates going higher on the 10-year and higher in the Treasury market, because we have no buyers right now. And of course, we're printing better than $2 trillion just to stay afloat. So we're defaulting on our budget. I also, last thing here, would like to note that gold and silver, I believe, are positioned incredibly well as we're looking forward here in 2024. So Q1 was good, but Q2 is going to be better. And then the second part of the year is going to ultimately be better yet. And so if we look at the US dollar relative to how many dollars it takes to buy gold, that tells you that inflation is up over 20% in the last 6 months. And so that's a better gauge of what we're actually paying for things, because the price of gold is a standardized thing that's always been there. And ultimately, it takes more dollars to get those, to get that gold. And, ultimately, the U.S. and the U.S. dollar are the strength of our nation. So we need to watch this index closely. We need to watch what's taking place. And hopefully we can make the right moves here as these economic factors continue to come out. But there's no easy answers.
Thank goodness it's Friday. Appreciate your candor. Dave Struzeski, CEO of Sound Planning Group. Good to see you, Dave.